Hi guys, in this interview we're going to be talking to Jason about so many different topics. We're going Project Bluebeam, we're going down to Peru, we're talking about the war on consciousness, we're talking about how you as a soul can learn to navigate 2024 and beyond as we look at the big picture moving towards ascension. This is an amazing interview and I know you're really going to enjoy all of the different places we explore. Jason, welcome to Australia. Welcome to tropical Queensland after all of your journeys. Now, you've been here for the EE System Centre tours.
Yep.
And from what we've heard, we've turned it on for you, the Aussies. You've had an amazing response. Let everyone know, what's it been like for you visiting Australia? This is your first visit, right?
My first time in Australia, and the events have been pretty awesome. They instead of hosting it in actual places of where the technology is, because those are generally smaller, people have been renting out venues. So we've had 200-300 plus at basically almost every single stop that I've been at so far, and it's been cool. It's I always say it's like America, but it's better because you guys are just a little superior than us. You might be lower on the map, but you're higher in the way that you guys live. And I say that because of your gas stations.
Oh, really?
We don't have the same operational gas stations like you do over here, meaning by us, you have to pay first. Over here, you fill up first. That means that people trust people more over here. By us, you would just see everybody stealing.
Right. That probably does go on here. That's why we pay so much more than you guys pay, right? It's to allow for the stealing.
But it was really cool. It was really cool. When I went to fill, I didn't understand. I went to pay first, and she didn't really get it. She's like, no, you got to fill first, and then you pay. I'm like, oh my God. So it's like gas on tap. It's cool. It's cool.
Well, that's a good observation.
Yeah.
What other little things have you noticed though? Because we have a different look on the English language than you guys do in the United States.
Yeah.
What are some of the little Aussie slang terms that you've learnt in your visit?
There have been many. The main one is good on you. Good on you, I know. There are a few others. I don't know why they're not coming to my head now. You've said them to me a few times. Give me some. Remind me.
Well, Roxy did ask you if you were going to wear your Speedos, remember? Your Speedos in the pool.
What'd she call them? They were 2 letters.
Yeah, it's DTs. I won't let people are going to have to use their imagination with that one. But it's something togs, because it makes your package look larger than it may be.
So I learned that.
Yeah.
A lot of, sometimes I have no clue what somebody says. I just nod my head. I'm like,
well, you call it a swimsuit. It's like boardies or togs.
We call it a bathing suit.
Yeah.
Bathing suit. But I guess you don't really bathe in it, right? And you swim. So I don't know. That's what I'm saying. You guys make more sense. It's us that, a mile. Yeah. What the hell is a mile? It doesn't make sense. We just made something up. It should be in kilometers. The only thing I don't get is the driving on the other side.
Yeah.
I've almost crashed a few times.
Oh, at least you got to learn on quiet Australian roads. Yeah. For me, I was on the 405 in LA, just go, oh my gosh, white knuckled, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
So we've got all of those wonderful things coming out in this visit for you, and you've had a chance to unwind. You got your last presentation tonight, and then tell people where you go, your tour around. You're gonna have some time off, right? New Zealand.
So I'm going to New Zealand because my next event, and my last event actually, is in Hawaii for the tour. Oh. So to get to Hawaii, I figured I'd stop in New Zealand on the way. I've never been there, so I'm going there for 3 days.
Yep. And
then from there straight to Maui, I think. And then from there, a few other events in California. So it's gonna be good.
Special energies in Hawaii.
Never been there either.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
This whole tour is new. And it's cool. It's I think traveling is important. I think it teaches you more than school will ever teach you, because you actually see how people live and you get to learn different aspects of human psychology, which is a very important part of this work, of learning how people think, learning how people receive certain things, and then recalibrating to them. Because, and you know this with your experience as being a speaker, it's not about you, it's about them. And you need to communicate in a way that they can understand, not in a way that you get it. Because if you speak in a way you understand, but you're not giving it in a way that they'll be able to receive, then it just goes over everybody's head.
Yeah.
So when speaking about things like the EE system, when speaking about things like TLS, all those things they're out there. But I think there's an art in taking things that are out there and then bringing them in a very grounded way to be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. With TLS, you can say, there's this crazy, amazing organization out there that does X, Y, and Z. And to most, that would be like, well, that sounds crazy. But then you can ground it by saying, how many of you agree or believe that there are negative organizations out there with negative intentions? And everybody would raise their hand. Okay, well, if you can believe that, can you believe that the opposite is true as well? Everybody's like, that makes sense. Now, just because we don't know the names of the good ones doesn't mean they don't exist. So when you explain it that way, instead of just talking about this crazy organization, it makes it make a lot more sense. It's like that art of grounding it in. So those are some of the things I've learned by traveling to all these different places and meeting a lot of different types of people.
Yeah. And what about for a personal level? You ever go to places and feel like it's doing something for you, like at a soul level? Or you've been there before, or you connect with it, or there's something familiar in the energy? Have you ever had that?
Yeah, there's some places that I love that make me feel really good, and there's some places that I don't, and I actually get physically sick.
Oh, really?
So, for example, Athens, not this time because I was just there recently, but the first time I went to Athens, I was throwing up for like 24 hours, and it wasn't food poisoning. It was not food poisoning, it was something else. And the second I left Athens, literally I drove out of Athens 2 hours, I was fine. And I got back and I got sick again. And it was this thing that I had to, overcome. And that's where I received help from my friend Damien Wynn, who lived in Athens at the time. And he helped me overcome all of that. So I would say that things like that have to do with more past life experiences. Like, let's say you were murdered in a place like that, or you had a very negative experience in a place like that. So you may have these subconscious things that start rising up. So I've had negative ones like that, which they're not negative, you're just overcoming something. And then positive ones where I feel home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like this idea because if this is the time of ascension, like if we're going to ascend in this lifetime, then there might be unfinished business, like at a soul level, things that our soul needs to tidy up before we're starting to merge the different aspects of ourselves back together, right? And ascend into a light body.
Yep.
So it could be perfectly lined up for your higher self. You need to go to Athens. You need to feel that sort of way, get some help, tidy it up.
And I think that's perfect. We all have like unfinished business or loose ends that need to be tied.
Yeah.
And I personally, I think that's why we come back here. It's not to smooth sail, but otherwise, why are you here?
Yeah.
I think the point is to go through all of those things, and going through a roller coaster doesn't need to be a negative experience once you understand the purpose of the roller coaster. So when you don't understand the purpose of the roller coaster, it could be this, negative sort of, why is this happening to me? When you understand the purpose of the roller coaster and the ups and downs of all of it happening for you, then your question changes and it suddenly becomes, what's the lesson for me? If you know the lesson, you can pass the test and you keep moving forward. I personally think that's why we come back. So I enjoy the hardships, in life, because they're the reason why we're here, not to suffer, to grow.
Yeah.
And in that way, it becomes a lot more fun.
Now, you've got Wanderer on your T-shirt, but getting to know you better, I don't feel like you've just wandered in this lifetime to sort of check things out. Obviously, you hear the term light worker. I would even go beyond just a light worker watching ascension take place, watching the war on consciousness. I would even get a feeling from you of being like a light warrior, right? Really being part of the shift, helping the shift. It's like, I feel the reason you and I click so well, like we've had lots of laughs, we get along well, but we do at a deeper level understand. We've probably been here before, done this, that song you love, that when you did the ice bath, seen it all before, that line from Xavier Rudd's Spirit Bird.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you resonate with that bigger mission, like you're here for a purpose to help humanity shift? Can you relate to that?
So I want to speak about light worker for a second.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anybody on this planet that isn't a light worker.
I love this.
I don't think that there's light worker and something else because
no NPCs then? People say that. Oh, so
no.
the guy that's a non-player character.
They could be an NPC to your life, but there's a relevance of why they're here in their life.
Yeah, agree with
And
that.
in that way, the only idea, if somebody were to speak about NPCs, of people in that way, non-playing characters, I would say that's somebody that doesn't completely understand the oneness of like the energetic universe.
Not very loving, is it?
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Forget love, no love, whatever it is. Factually, it doesn't make sense because it's almost like this. When you look at the ocean, you see all these different waves. To an individual who doesn't understand that it's all part of the ocean, you would think that wave A and wave B are two separate waves. What they really are is just the same energy being expressed in different ways. So one's a bigger wave and one's a smaller wave. But they're all energy being expressed through what we call the medium of water. So me and you are waves. We seem to be separate, but we're part of the same energy that's animating through a physical vessel. That's one's expressed as Pete, one's expressed as Jason, but it's still part of the same ocean of creation, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. So when you say NPC, or when one would say NPC, it's neglecting the idea that there's an ocean that all waves are a part of, and nothing can actually be separate from that. Now, if all is one, if all comes from source, then logically speaking, source would never do anything to hurt itself. Just like you wouldn't take a hammer and break your own leg because you're one united individual in your body and you don't want to experience pain. You don't want to get hurt. So in that same way, if source is all one energetically speaking, even though it's expressed as separate things, but if it's all one energetically speaking, then could there really be anybody here that's here to do harm? Now the question would be, well, what about people here that are doing negative things? What about the people here that are hurting children? What about the people here that are committing crimes? And if you really want to talk about what we were speaking about yesterday, the beauty of inversion, those people are the greatest light workers on the planet because they're the reason why the Great Awakening is happening. So it's just like the hardest obstacles in our lives are the greatest gifts and the greatest opportunities to grow. The most evil people on this planet, they came here to play a role. They're not good people on the surface, but their soul came here to play a role. And there's multiple different roles simultaneously. But if you really go and invert the situation, you would come down to a very obvious conclusion. Why is the Great Awakening happening? Not because of the light workers that we think are the light workers. Sure, we're a part of it. But it's the people that caused people like us to rise up in the first place. Why do I do what I do? Because those people piss me off. Because I see what they're doing to kids and it upsets me. It infuriates me. That's what gives me the fuel to keep going. That's what causes me to want to go and travel the world. Why did I create Unified Healing? Because there's a whole industry of people that are poisoning people and killing people. So I wanted people to find an alternative way to find healing within themselves. That would have never happened if you didn't have the negative polarities and the individuals that many call evil in the world. So they're the ones that cornered us in a way to have to find our purpose once again. That's why I say I don't believe in light workers and something else. I think everybody is working for the light, only some in much more obvious ways than others. And the ones that appear to be the darkest are the ones that illuminate the light the brightest. But to answer your question, yeah, I've always had this calling. I've always had let's put it this way. If I didn't, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today because what I'm doing today, I don't need to do whatsoever. I come from, real estate and family business, and that's what I was doing. To leave the family business, it was very inconvenient. It was much harder than staying. Staying was a very easy thing to do. Everything was set. I was the vice president of the company, and everything was good. I could have still gone to Australia, New Zealand, and Hawaii without doing events and driving from place to place every day and just to relax and enjoy. But that wasn't fulfilling. I felt like I came here to do something bigger. So that's why I do what I do.
Right. Now, Ra talks about the choosing then, where you go from being service to self-orientated into service to others. Mm-hmm. That was that choice that you made.
Yes.
Now, the TLS came and were introduced to you, or you were introduced to them. How did that tie in with that that choosing, let's call it, for you to like decide to make that decision? Because we've experienced it ourselves. It's like out there to make, like people hear it, read it in a book, like, oh yeah, that sounds really good. But when you've actually got to go out there and be of service to others and talk about weird stuff that no one wants to talk about, and you know, trauma and healing and light beings and extraterrestrials and the war on consciousness, a lot of people are just like, oh,
Yeah.
it might be just easier to keep doing real estate or insurance in our case or whatever, you know, and let someone else deal with that. Tell us about how the TLS tied into your choosing to be of service to others, because it's a big thing for your soul.
Yeah. How and why, I could tell you how on my experience. Why, I think I'm still learning, right? And I don't know if I'll ever have a complete answer. And I'm not sure it matters.
Right.
The how, my experience was in 2018, it was just an approaching that was really a recruiting that I didn't know was a recruiting, but somebody approached me. We ended up getting close. Really, really interesting man, very successful man, very intelligent man. And we just kept in touch. And from 2018 to 2020, that continued. And in 2020, I was invited to a meeting, and that was my first ever TLS meeting, and it lasted a long time. It was on February 6th, almost to this day. It was on February 6th of 2020, almost exactly 4 years ago. And on that day was where everything kind of changed for me, because that was when I was more, not officially brought in, because even till today, I'm not officially a part of the organization. There was a process of what that would look like. But I have all the same rights as somebody that would be, in a way. So I have contacts in the organization. I can ask for assistance with the organization. I'm given certain things to do from the organization, part of EE system and unified healing and all that. I was sent to Vegas by the organization to go and do that interview. So they play a hand in a lot of things that I do, but it's not like on a daily basis, 24/7 of how it goes. You know, they're always there, and if they need to share something with me, they will. And if I need to ask them something, I will. And just to make this clear, we're not talking about like a galactic federation of light or anything like that. This is a very physical organization with physical human beings that you can call, that you can email, that you could sit with at a table. It's like me and you. It's the same idea, because people hear me speak sometime and they think it has things to do with channeling and all that. That's not what I personally do. What I do, I don't know how to do that. It's not my thing. What I do is and maybe because of my background of coming from a more physical place, that's what resonates with me more, because it's easier for me to connect in that way. I believe in all the other things. I have experiences with all the other things, but with TLS, it's a physical experience that we're talking about here. I just want to make that clear for anybody that would hear this and maybe misconstrue that, because I've heard people twist words that I've never said before. Yeah. So I want to make that super clear. But they basically brought me in a very unique way. And it's a very long story, but on February 6th of 2020 in that meeting, it was basically a document that my mentor, who we call Ray, was ordered to write. And that document, today we call it the Pyramid Code. Mm-hmm. I got the document about 4 months later, so in June of 2020. So the meeting was in February. In June of 2020, I got the document. It was handwritten, then it was typed. It was all in Hebrew, and then it had to be translated. And I'm looking at this whole thing, and I wanted to put it out. He didn't want to put it out because he wants to remain he doesn't want his life to change. And today I understand him. I do. I could see where he's coming from, because they basically wanted him to do what I'm doing today. And he's an older guy with a family. He doesn't want to deal with it. And he doesn't need to deal with it. And he's good. Like, he has his business. He's great. And for me, it wasn't enough. You know, for me, I didn't care if I was good. It wasn't good in my eyes to sit there and not do anything because I was taken care of. I felt that the document could help a lot of people. So we were going back and forth, and I wanted to share it and all that. And there was a compromise made, and that compromise was between me, Ray, and the organization. The organization wanted it out. I wanted it out. He didn't want to put it out. The compromise was, they came to me and said, Jason, you can put it out. To honor what he wants, you're going to have to take his name out and anybody else's name out, with the exception of your own, because I'm listed in the document, and there's a rabbi that's listed in the document as well. Those are the only two names in the document that are real. All the other names were other names that were switched to protect people's identities. And That was the compromise. I said, I'll do it, because imagine I said no. Imagine I said, no, I'm not going to do it. You know, I just try to convince him, and now they're giving me the opportunity, and you can't do that.
Yeah.
So we put it out. It reached in 3 hours after it came out on September 9th of 2020. 9/9 at 9 a.m. of 2020, it came out, reached every continent on Earth with the exception of Antarctica in 3 hours. Millions of people. And that's what started the whole journey, and it kept going.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, so much in that too, you know, there's so much information. Now, I've seen some of the questions in your interviews and etc. Just make it really clear. It's like, you know, you're Jewish, raised Jewish, you talk about the rabbi.
Yeah.
It's written in Hebrew. Is this just a Jewish thing, or does this apply to everyone? The TLS in particular, the agents, the agency. Can you explain what that law looks like?
It's not Jewish whatsoever. The people that are relevant to me in my immediate circle, think of the organization as like pockets.
Yes.
Think of it like when you go to school. You have a whole grade of individuals, but there's the Asians, and there's the Jews, and there's the Black people, and they just stick together because it's their people. You know, you go to lunch and you see the Asians sitting together and the Hispanics sitting together, but they're still all part of 4th grade or 5th grade or 6th grade or whatever it may be. So in the organization, it's not quite people sticking together, but everybody has a relevant mission. The reason why Hebrew is a big part of TLS is not because Hebrew is a Jewish thing. People think that Hebrew is tied to Judaism, and it's not. The Hebrew language, the Hebrew alphabet, comes from the Aramaic alphabet. The Aramaic alphabet was used by the Assyrians. The Assyrians existed before Judaism existed as a religion. The reason why it's called Hebrew is because after, if you follow the Old Testament as a historical document, forget about religion. If you follow it as a historical document, it was the Hebrews that were in Egypt, and then they left Egypt, and we call that the Exodus. And before they so-called reached Israel, they were in the desert. And in the desert, the Hebrews received the Torah on Mount Sinai. That's, again, forget about my beliefs on this, because I have varying opinions on how this whole thing actually went down. But we're not talking about that. I'm just referring to the document. As a historical document, the Hebrews went into the desert, received the Torah on Mount Sinai, and that's when they became the Jewish people. The reason why they call Hebrew Hebrew is because the Hebrew nation adopted the language. That's why they call it Hebrew. But the language existed beforehand. Now that language has nothing to do with religion. It's a language that's based on mathematics. Languages that are based on mathematics are languages that are discovered as opposed to languages that are created. So to TLS, for example, they use a book called, in Hebrew, they call it Sefer HaYetzirah. In English, they call it the Book of Creation. Greg Braden speaks about it. It's believed to be written by Abraham, but nobody actually knows who wrote it. It's a book written in Aramaic, and it's short. But it's certain, each letter and each word has a frequency behind it. When you speak it, it has a frequency behind it. So using languages that were discovered, you'll be able to manipulate certain energies, frequencies, and vibration. You'll be able to stop a natural disaster. That's how they do it. They use the Book of Creation with certain phrases to induce out-of-body experiences. They use it to stop a natural disaster or make it rain if they need it to rain, to stop something from happening if somebody's trying to do something. They can do all those things because creation, if you even go to the Bible, again, not as a religious document, but as a historical document, it starts with, and God said, let there be light. It's all in speech. Now, when you think about that for a second, and I'm answering it in this way because people think because there are people who use the Hebrew language, it's all a Jewish thing, and it's not. There are people who aren't Jewish that will use the Hebrew language to do certain things, and more specifically use Aramaic to do specific things. So I'll give you examples. Take the Schumann resonance. The Schumann resonance bass, it changes all the time, but it's 7.83 hertz. Schumann resonance is the heartbeat of Earth. It's like the resonance of life. If you go to a language like Hebrew, for example, a discovered language, and you take the word life, spelled with 2 letters, Chai, Chet and Yud. Chet is the 8th letter of the alphabet. Yud is the 10th letter of the alphabet. When you add it up, Chai equals 18. 18 represents the resonance of life. If you go back to the Schumann resonance and you add 7, 8, and 3, you're going to get 18. It's all speaking creation into existence by understanding the fundamentals of creation in the first place. Another example I can give you is English is a created language. It's arbitrary. So if I say the letter A out loud, there's a frequency, there's a sound to that.
Yes.
And if I were to map that sound as a shape using certain technologies, it would be an arbitrary shape. But when I say the letter Aleph, which is the first letter of the Hebrew and Aramaic alphabet, and I were to map out that sound as a shape using certain technologies that are accessible to everybody today, it would look like the letter. They're speaking creation into existence using conscious speech based on mathematics. So that's why you see the pyramid code written in Hebrew, because it's based on fundamental codes of the universe. There are certain codes that are being transmitted through the document, not in a religious way, not in a Jewish way, but in a way of understanding creation from its base. So in short, the people that are closest to me, yes, they're closest to that, but they're all against religion. They may be Jews in this life, but they will all agree with you that at some point, religion will see its demise, and we'll come to a point where we're all connected under one energy, under one united energy. Call it love, call it whatever you want. That's not going to change the fact that certain languages are discovered, and using languages can help create certain things. And if the wrong people get that, you can do a lot of harm. The term abracadabra, it comes from Aramaic. People associate with witches because you do abracadabra and you bring something into being. Abracadabra really just means when you speak, you create. You're speaking something into creation and physical existence. And the way that that works in a short way is there's three different, I know it's a lot of information right now, there's three different dimensions of how we can break this down: thought, speech, matter. So take this glass. This glass exists as a physical glass. This glass exists as a word. I could speak about it. This glass exists as a thought. I can think about it. What's the difference between the thought, the word, and the physical object of the glass? And the answer is it's frequency. Almost like if you take the water in the glass, it can be a gas, it can be a liquid, it can be a solid. It doesn't change the fact that it's H2O. It changes how close the molecules are. So gas, molecules are further. Water, they're closer. Solid, they're closest. Same idea with abracadabra. If you know how to use certain languages in a conscious way, you can take the thought of a glass, you can use a certain phrase, almost like they do in Harry Potter, to bring something into existence with specific sounds, and then you can manifest the physical object in your hand. And that way, it's not magic. There's a science behind it. We just don't know how to do it on the collective level. But that's how it works. It's changing the frequency from the thought to the speech, which is the bridge between the thought and the matter, into the physical object of what's going to be in your hand. And it's cool. So that's really how they do things, and that's why it's connected to Hebrew. It's not a Jewish thing whatsoever. It's because of its base.
That's a beautiful explanation. Like, there's so much information in there.
A lot.
Like,
a lot.
Love it. So let's go to some quick ones. You're around all this information. You're talking to Ray all the time. Absolutely. What's your thoughts? Is there definitely physical extraterrestrial beings? They're not light beings. They're not some sort of consciousness. They're like physical beings. They exist, no doubt in your mind?
There's all of the above. There's light beings. There's beings in different dimensions. I don't know why we call them extraterrestrial. It's like,
this is a term.
It's just I know. I'm saying in the world, why we call them extraterrestrial. Maybe because they're beyond our land, but it's just life, you know? But yeah, of course. The very proof of that is look at the human race. Look at human beings. There is no way that an Asian can turn to a black person. It doesn't exist. It's two different things.
There is some weird changes going on in this world, though.
It's just two different things. You see, based on where you go, different types of characteristics.
Yeah.
So you can tell me that maybe, we evolved from a whale that somehow started breathing out of water and, became a lizard and then turned to a monkey and then became a human somehow, even though evolution is based on survival of the fittest, all those things still exist. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Or we can just follow the drawings that we have on all our ancient sites, which show us an interbreeding of different types of species that create different types of offsprings. To me, that makes a lot more sense. And the reason why I bring that in, because I can share in this interview, yeah, okay, so TLS works for them, but that doesn't mean much because somebody would have to believe that to be true in order to accept that. So just to make it make sense, look at the world around you. If you've never seen an Asian person before, ever in your life, and suddenly I brought you to Asia, that would be an alien to you. Same thing for an Asian person going to Africa.
Yeah.
If you've never seen an African before and you were only in China and you've never left, and I told you, I said, Pete, let's say we're both Asians, and I said, Pete, there's this race, they're generally much taller. They have a different type of hair, right? It's not the same long, regular hair that you see. Their noses are a little bit wider. Their lips are a little bit bigger. Their ears are a little bit smaller. This is what Africans look like. These are their characteristics. And they're much stronger. They just have stronger physiques. You'd be like, wow. Oh, and none of them have blue eyes for the most part. Then if you're an African, I say there's this race that they're generally shorter, pale skin, black hair. They don't have any black, brown sometimes. Their noses, they're wider, but they're flatter. Now we're talking about Asians. Wider, but they're flatter. You'll see every so often a tall one, but it's not that common. You call that Asians. Mm. So if you've never seen it before, it's alien to your awareness. And I think the only reason why we call ourselves human beings is because we got used to each other. But even in this room, I mean, I'm brown and you're not. Mm. We're two different things. We're human beings. We're all life, but we're two different things. So just like once we were only on one continent, let's say, to our awareness, and then we expanded and started seeing other species, and now we call that life interplanetary, I think one day the expansion of that will look like the same thing, only intergalactic. So instead of going from Asia to Europe or Asia to North America, you're going to go from planet Earth to Sia, for example, a different planet, or Nashia, which is a different planet where they look more like Mayans. And that's it. And then it's going to be a different level of connection. One day we didn't have planes. We couldn't go intercontinental. Today we do. We have planes and boats and all that. Today we don't have spaceships that are very common, but one day we will. And then intergalactic will make sense. And I think it's just a part of evolution. And then if the cycle repeats itself, there are going to be certain people that don't like that because that type of travel will not work on gas or oil. It's going to work on what we call free energy technology, which completely will disrupt the current technologies and, systems that we have in the world today. And that's probably why they deleted our own history and erased that from what's already happened, because we know that they've been here. We see them being drawn on structures that we don't know how they built. So if they were here 3,000 years ago, people always ask, when will contact be made? Contact's already here. It's been happening. Right. It's just not accepted. And even if I brought an alien right now on this camera, most people wouldn't believe it. They would say it's either a midget in Hollywood clothing, if it's short, or it's just makeup on a large human. That's it. It's all the barriers of our belief and what we're willing to accept. And what we're willing to accept is based on how many other people accept it and how many influential people accept it, unfortunately. That's why we can believe things that don't make any sense nowadays. Because the famous celebrities say it, so it must be true. Or the politicians say it, so it must be true. Now the world's waking up. But the reason why I share that is because extraterrestrial life, again, I could have just answered your question and said, yes, I believe that it's here. But I wanted to instead of telling somebody how to think or what to think, teach them how to think, and why I even got to that conclusion in the first place of it's obvious. There's no way that there isn't other life here, already here and on other planets. And if they're coming here and we don't collectively know about them, they're much more advanced than us. If they're much more advanced than us and they didn't wipe us out or hurt us, that means that they're much more enlightened than we are as well, which means they're not here to hurt us either.
Right.
And that's how we connect those dots in terms of their intentions beyond their existence.
So you've sent like a group of filmmakers down to Peru to check out this so-called finding in the cave, right? Perhaps describe to people a little bit more about this finding of whatever we're going to call them after your beautiful answer again to that question before, right? This extension of human life. There used to be giants, they'd found bones, huge skulls. There's lots of photos of that erased. I agree with what you're saying. They disappear from museums, and you know, the documents, the photographs get less and less, but you hear about them, particularly in Malta. And they were very tall humans. It's talked about in it's pretty common. Lots of different countries have history talking about giants. The ones in Peru, though, were said to be very small. Can you elaborate a little bit more? How many bodies are we talking about? Like, this is pretty exciting and new information. What can you share?
So right now there are 2 bodies that they brought from Peru to Mexico. They're small.
They're not tall.
They're small, but they look like us with variations, right? Their face is more like almost if you took a gorilla. You know, a gorilla, when you look at the face, it has like a flat, like outward face to it. So think about it like that, with like a more older African style pharaonic pharaoh head that's more like elongated. So it's a combination of multiple things. I have yet to see them in person. I'm going to be seeing them in person sometime over the next couple of weeks. And we're trying to hold a congressional hearing with the bodies in Washington, D.C. to bring it to people and to show Congress, even though it's corrupt, but to show Congress what's going on, you know, and this is here. They found, I forgot the number, but a significant more amount of bodies in a cave in Peru that our team is there right now checking it out and seeing what's going on. And there's good news that people think is bad news. The bad news publicly is people are coming and saying it's fake. The good news is if it's fake, the government won't want to seize it from you. If they accepted that it was real, then they would go and take it over right away. But if they're saying, they're calling them dolls. They're calling them dolls made from animal bones. If you look at them, you'll see they're not. But the fact that they're calling them that, it can bite them in the butt real big. They're saying that because if they went, think about it from the government's perspective and people that don't want this to be an accepted narrative, because this would also then raise the questions, how did they get here? How did they get here? What technology were they using? And why don't we have it here right now? That goes to free energy technology, and a lot of people lose a lot of power, a lot of money, a lot of control. So on one side, they're saying it's not real. And they're saying it's not real because they want to throw that narrative away. If they said it was real, it would be a problem. The good part of them trying to, neglect it and say it's not real is it gives us more time with this in our possession to do scientific studies on them. You can do autopsies, you can do genetic testing, which, by the way, was done. And it showed that it wasn't the DNA of a human being. It showed that it wasn't even DNA from here on planet Earth that we know. So it's something different.
Huge. That's huge.
It's huge.
The DNA is huge. If it's not human DNA, that dispels all the myths of dwarf, like smaller people, or some sort of genetic disformity or something like that they might try and use as an excuse. But if it's off-planet DNA,
and it's a really big deal. So
that's exciting.
Right. So we're using that right now to bring it to the public, and I think there will come a point where they come and maybe somebody's going to be taken out. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if something like that were to happen. The guy that has them suddenly is nowhere to be found. That's why they're being careful with it, because they know that although they're saying it's not real, there are people that are very threatened by it that aren't showing to the public that they're threatened by it. So all we can do is just go full force and bring it out, and make that more obvious and apparent. And once it's accepted, a lot more other things will be accepted, and certain things will be harder to hide, like the technologies that we do have on this planet, that we're able to do incredible things. But then cars, airplanes, Uber, all those things, they go to the garbage. It's over. For the better. We're able to do much better things in the world. We're able to travel at much faster speeds. We're able to travel at much more effective and efficient ways without burning oil and gas. You don't have to do that. You can use the energy within the entirety of the universe to do that.
How do we get this? Didn't Ray mention something about using the ocean and water as a method of travel? or transportation.
Yeah.
I'd love to learn that. It's 15 hours for me to come visit you in America. It's like too far. I'll go down to the beach and how do I do it? Like, what's the key?
So
you know?
he actually wanted to go and learn it himself, but they barred him from it.
Well,
The reason why they barred him from it is because he's crazy. Because he would do things and use them. Number one, you're not allowed to do that, for example. Like he would want to use it to go and travel from, let's say, Australia to New York like that, because you could do it.
But is that harmless enough? Like,
You're not supposed to use those things for any purposes other than what they call divine purposes. Anything like levitation, you can't do it for fun. You don't do it for fun. You have to do it because there's a very, very good reason to do something like that. So for example, there are some times where even somebody like the rabbi, he'll get on an airplane. He doesn't need to get on an airplane. He does not need to get on an airplane. No way. I know what he can do. He can get places on the other side. They can, as a matter of fact, in Rays of Light it's spoken about. They've gone from New York to Australia in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Using certain things that in Hebrew they call it an ascension. An ascension is an elevated form of an out-of-body experience. It's an out-of-body experience that you can bring your body with you. So you can call that a form of levitation, but it's not exactly what people think it is. It works a little differently. Using something like that, you can travel from New York to Australia very quickly. So the question is, when they need to go there, why would they ever get on a plane? And the answer is, unless they have to get there very fast for a very good reason, they're going to do everything like everybody else. You only go, for example, recently, 3 weeks ago, Ray had to go to Egypt. He had to go to Egypt to do something side by side with Robert Edward Grant in the pyramid when Robert was just there on his trip.
Yeah.
He didn't have time to get on a plane. They sent him to go and do something, so it took him 5 minutes to get there. He was there for 6 hours and he came back. That's a situation where you can use something like that. When you're talking about with the water, is a little different. By the way, there are stories of where
That's pretty huge. So did he come out into the Great Pyramid? Like, is there a doorway there, or
No. You
when
do
you
some...
say he just appeared in Egypt?
Oh no, when I say you appear, I mean, okay, take levitation. I'm going around it because it sounds crazy, but we'll talk about it.
But I love it. Like this is the thing that, and I'm trying to get to how it's a bad thing. Like, wouldn't it be great to be able to zip around? Like,
eventually in a world that can handle something like that, for sure, I would assume so. But right now, you don't. It's not that it's a bad thing. It's if it's not used for, again, divine purpose. For example, when he was taught how to do things like levitation, he started using it for fun. He started using it because he wanted to go around and entertain himself. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that. You can't do
freak people out on the 14th floor, just knocking on the
window. You can't do that.
You know?
Somebody that you see, those people in India that you see them levitate on the side of the road, they're not real. It's possible to do that. But somebody that has that ability will never use it for a purpose like that, ever. They'll never use it to make some change on the side of the road. What you're seeing over there is an illusion. Levitation is real, but those people can't do it. Not the people that you're seeing, getting $1 or $2 on the side of the road.
So how does Ray get to Robert Edward Grant?
So the way that was, I'm going to use Hebrew and I'll translate it. In Hebrew, there's something called a yetziah. Yetziah means an exit. The exit of what? Of the body. So yetziah means out-of-body experience, the same way most people understand an out-of-body experience. So it's just moving with like your soul, your energy, whatever you want to call it, where there's a silver cord attached. And aliyah, which is an ascension to elevate, is a little different than an exit. Aliyah really means an elevation. So the difference between an exit and an elevation is an elevation, as I said earlier, you leave your body, but you bring the body with you. So it's your soul doing the work, but your body can follow suit.
Got it.
The only caveat there is you will not be able to travel further than everybody has a different length of a silver cord that connects. It's like an etheric cord that connects the physical body to the energetic, spiritual body, soul, whatever you want to call it. The shortest your silver cord can be is dictated by the circumference of your planet. Oh. So there's nobody here on planet Earth that has a silver cord that's shorter than 24,000 miles. The more evolved you are, the longer that can go. The reason why that's important is because if you try and do something like an aliyah or an elevation, and you want to go to a different planet that happens to be further than your silver cord, you will not come back. It will tear, you're gone, you could try again later. That's why they don't teach it to everybody. Because if you're not careful with something like that, you can lead to issues. Then there are crazy people out there. For example, if you had somebody that knew how to do this, I'll give you a technicality of what can be done by somebody who knows this. That is a very negative thing if you were to do it, if you had this knowledge of how to actually do it. Let's say my silver cord is only 100,000 miles, but I need to get 200,000 miles. That's short distances, but I'm just giving you numbers. Right. But I had to get 200,000 light years away, 200,000 miles away. And I can't get there. If I was sick in the head and I knew how to do this, this is what I could do. If your silver cord is 50,000 miles and Roxy's silver cord is 50,000 miles, then I can find a way to kill you guys. I could take that cord, I can tie it to mine, and I can go further.
Whoa.
That's a reason why you have to be very careful who you teach these things to. Because the second you get into the power of that world, it's a whole different ballgame. You're getting to the level of playing God. And if somebody tries to play God in that world, you have a lot of issues. If anybody ever does something like that in TLS, you're X'd out. They take you out. You're gone. You'll get into a car accident. You're not allowed to do things like that. They will make sure that when Ray says they're taken care of, that means you're X'd. You're gone. There's only two ways of taking care of somebody. Way number one is you erase their memory. They can do that. I've seen it. Way number two is they got into a car accident. And you will only do something like that if the person is coming and using something for a very corrupt purpose to do harm to people around the world. You got to get rid of that immediately. You can't let that fester.
Wow. Wow.
So
this is fascinating. So Robert Edward Grant was in there. I've been in the Great Pyramid with Robert Edward Grant. If there's one human on earth who could understand the mathematics of language being spoken, it's Robert.
Yeah.
So does Robert remember having a conversation with Ray? Did he sort of turn around? There was a guy there going, "Hi, I'm Ray, and I need to..." No.
So the way that it works is, it's funny. I'll tell you the story real quick. So I was supposed to be on that trip with Robert. I couldn't make it. This was just now, about a month ago. A month, maybe even less. Very, very recently. Yeah, about a month ago. So Robert calls me in the beginning of January. And he's like, "Listen, I had a crazy experience. A few months ago, you called me. You told me the pyramids are spaceships. And I thought you were crazy. But now I understand what you were talking about, and I can even explain it scientifically." We stayed on a call for about an hour. He was explaining everything to me. The man's a genius. He's very,
so
very
hard to follow him.
No, but it was very, very fascinating with the way that he was explaining it and how he was tying it back to what was written in the Pyramid Code and how it all makes sense in his level of scientific expertise and mathematical expertise. So he was explaining the whole thing and how that whole thing worked. So we're talking. I'm like, okay, cool. So I needed him to... He understood how the pyramids were like teleportation devices and gateways and portals. He didn't quite understand, which I don't understand either, how the pyramids can actually physically fly and move, right? He couldn't explain that.
Wow.
So just a couple days later, if not the day after, I interviewed Ray. This was in the beginning of January. So this is going to be broken up into the Pyramid Code Part 3 and Part 4.
Oh,
this
was
is a new,
going to be exciting.
Very good conversation. So in Part 4 is where we speak about this, where Robert wanted to meet Ray. So on the interview, I said, "Ray, there's a guy named Robert Edward Grant. You know of him because I've told you all about him. He really, really wants to meet you. He wants to meet you. He wants to talk to you. We'll keep everything under wraps. He can be trusted." And he sits there, and you'll see it on camera. He sits there, Ray sits there and crosses his arms like this. And he's like, "Well, I have something to tell you that's going to surprise you." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Robert already met me. He just doesn't know it was me." I said, "When?" He said, "Just now, recently in Egypt." I'm like, "What do you mean? What were you doing?" He said, "I was sent there to go and do something to help him see certain things, to unlock a next level in what his path holds, but for a much bigger purpose." Then we started speaking, and I said, okay, I have to play devil's advocate and the skeptic here.
Yeah.
You could be lying. You need to tell me something that only Robert would know that happened over there.
Oh, I love this. Okay. Yeah.
That I can't know because I wasn't there. Yeah. That nobody could know that was there because they weren't there. Only something that Robert would know. And he said a few things. And then he said, what I did to him caused for him to be able to see lights on the wall inside the pyramid that nobody else would be able to see. Ask him. So right after the interview, I called Robert. And I'm like, Robert, just answer a few questions. I'll tell you why I'm asking after. Like, okay. Now I asked Ray, when was this? Give me a day. He said, I'm not going to give you a day. I'm not going to give you the date. I said, can you tell me the time of day? He said, during the day. I said, okay, where? He said, I think it was in the Great Pyramid or something like that. Okay, cool. So I called Robert and I said, Robert, I need you just to answer these questions and I'll tell you what's going on. Number one. Oh, and Ray also said that he went undercover as a local Egyptian. Okay. So I called Robert and I said, when you were in the pyramid, when were you there? Like, were you ever there during the day? Inside? And he said, only once. That's already a hit.
Boom.
Because if it's only once and he says I was there during the day, there's...
When I went with him, it was at night because by day it's too busy, right?
Yeah.
So you can only get a private visit at night. So it's rare that you would be there by day. Just saying.
So during the day. And I said, and who was with you? He said, my group. I said, but who was a part of your group? And he said, there was my group and we had some locals, like Egyptians there. And I'm like smiling already. And then I gave the third one to see what he would say. And I said, did you see anything when you looked at the walls that nobody else could see? And he said, yeah, I saw lights. And I just got the chills. I was like, oh my God. And then I explained the whole situation to him. And I said, so listen, I asked Ray on your behalf. First of all, I'll get you guys to meet at some point, even though he's saying, no, I'll make it happen. Just give me some time. But I asked on your behalf, what would be the next step for Robert to do in order to understand the piece that he didn't understand of how they actually fly? And then he explained things with electromagnetic pulsation, electromagnetic laser pulsation, which, by the way, Robert happens to have about 70 patents in. So he's already an expert in that, which means he has the knowledge base to understand what needs to go next of understanding how these pyramids actually move. And the unique thing with Robert, because I said, why'd you go to Robert? There's a lot of people that you could have gone to. Why him? They said because he holds a certain ability of actually activating the power of thought, which is necessary to activate the pyramid. We all have power of thought, but Robert is very close to it in terms of actually using the power of thought in a way to activate the pyramid. And he has a specific signature that will allow him to do that. So that's why the organization sent Ray to go and do what he did to Robert. Now, he didn't go and say anything to Robert. He didn't say, hi, this is who I am. The way that it works is it's something called transducing. Transducing is a way of, basically you can influence or inspire or activate certain things in the mind to get somebody to see something without you knowing. So it could be, let's say Ray was one of the security guards and he walked up behind Robert and he said, be careful. That touch with a certain word is a portion of transducing. So in that moment, he did something to Robert to get Robert to start seeing certain things on the wall that other people wouldn't be able to see. That's part of the way that whole thing would work. So I don't know who Ray was in the pyramid, but that's how that whole situation works. They've done transducing to me. I know it because they did it to me and I wrote an entire book. And after I wrote the book, I saw basically the entirety of the book written somewhere else without me knowing that it was written there.
Wow.
So it was a lot of really interesting stuff. But in short, the way that Ray got there is using what we just said of not just a Yetzirah, not just an exit, but an Aliyah, which is an ascension, which allows you to do things like levitation.
So has the TLS ever thought about helping people who are keen and want to learn more, improving their abilities, unlocking, natural gifts that we all seem to have? Some sort of mystery school, some sort of way for people to learn more of these principles, these sorts of elevated consciousness type things, which ultimately would help to swing the balance of consciousness on the planet?
Yeah, so there are schools. They're not schools that are open to the public. There are schools that are, for example, one that I know of, I'm sure that there are many, but one that I know of is right underneath the Western Wall in the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. It's a school that basically is like the rabbi school.
Yeah.
And that specific school focuses on like mysticism and Kabbalah specifically, not in a Jewish religion way, but using certain languages and words and phrases and certain things to do a lot of different, think of it like a Harry Potter school, literally only in real life. Only in that case, it's only for men, that specific school.
Yeah.
There are schools all over from other people that will do different purposes and different things of how to do certain things. Now, when it comes to the public, is there a school that you can go to learn from TLS? No, I don't think that that's what their purpose really is. They're more on a focused, targeted level of we're gonna teach certain people to do certain things that will in turn activate the world to get to the point of what you just said.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're really focused on they're focused on the masses, not in a very individual way, more in a mass scale. They count on the awakening of the masses to go and have people like you and Roxy who will stand up and start teaching in your own way. That's a part of their mission. And whether you're a part of them or not, it's not relevant. We're all on the same mission. And it doesn't matter if you're going to a school that's run by them or a school that was inspired by their same mission. It's the same idea. And there's so many different schools out there that you can learn from. You can, anything from Reiki to, learning whatever it is that you want to learn. It's like an endless amount of knowledge and things that you can access. But I would say so long as you're on the mission of how do I become a better version of myself? How do I give more? How do I create more value for the world? If you do more of that, you're doing exactly what you just said of how do we tip the scale? Because you can have all the schools out there you want. If people don't have the demand and the want and the desire to go and learn, they're not going to do it. Now, if you don't have all the schools, but you have the desire, people will find ways. Right. And when you do it that way, you have a much more effective awakening than the other way of trying to get people to do it. You need it to come from people. You need it to come from your own self of saying, I'm ready to do this and I want to do this. And that way, like I never really went to school. I was inspired by it. So I started reading a lot and learning a lot and writing a lot. And that was my school. So everybody has a different way of doing it. But in short, TLS doesn't have public schools that you can go to because that's just not how they work. But it also really doesn't matter. And maybe they do have schools that I don't even know that's associated with them, but not to my knowledge.
Right. Do they ever talk then about how humanity is going in terms of, let's call it the scale of consciousness or whatever you may call it? You know, they often talk about too, once we get to a certain percentage of people that are open for disclosure, then there'll be disclosure, right? More of us need to be open to it. Any idea on what percentage? Like I've heard percentages and they were, because I'm around it all the time, I thought we were going well, but they were a bit lower than what I thought, but it kind of made sense. But have you heard any numbers like that of like the percentage of the population that's more positively orientated than negative or that?
Yeah, so it all depends. First of all, so you said something that I think is important when it comes to disclosure. When enough people are open for disclosure, then disclosure will happen. The question is where will it happen? And the answer is within yourself. We have all of these, everything that people want to know, it's already there. The problem is people are not ready to accept it, so they call it fake. When people are ready to open up, when they reach a different consciousness, the things that they see in front of them will change. The way that they look at those things will change. So disclosure has already happened on an objective level. It's the subjective level where it needs to change. And that can only change through our own awakening when we start changing certain things. So it's really an internal, inward game of changing the world, because the world is a reflection of your own subjective beliefs and opinions and thoughts. And as those become more expansive, your perception, what you perceive, will change as well. It's that same idea. So when it comes to a critical mass of what you're talking about, I've heard a lot of numbers, but I think the number will change based on what your average mean will be. So we were speaking about the map of consciousness yesterday. Yeah. So you have, let's say, 0 to 1,000. Well, 700 people, one person at 700, at an energy of 700, of what that book speaks about the map of consciousness and how it interprets it. One person at 700, if I'm not mistaken, would counterbalance like 50 million people or something like that at 200. So, and one person at 1,000 would counteract like, I think, or counterbalance, I think like 2 billion people.
Yeah.
So what that really means is this. That means that if we just had 4 billion people, 4 people on the planet at 1,000, you would have a critical mass. That means that if we had, let's say 100 people at 700, you would have a critical mass. It all depends on what level each person is at. And then you can see how that weighs out. So if you're talking about a mean at 1,000, you're going to need much less people than a mean at 500 because of how the exponential weight will weigh differently. So there's no actual number to what a critical mass is, of what that looks like. But what I can tell you for sure is it doesn't take the majority of humanity in order to wake up and change the balance of the world energetically. It takes a critical mass, which in theory just means, in principle just means, if enough of us rise up to a certain level, we will help counterbalance that just by our level of being.
So do you think the 144,000 comes into that at all? Is there some
we would have to do math.
Yeah,
we would have to do
it'd be
math.
very interesting to...
Yeah, we would have to do math to understand what number 144,000 would need to be to counteract the negative polarity in the world. Because once you have enough of that, you shift the resonance that you're at collectively. And as you shift that collective resonance, people will start synchronizing with that, almost like women who synchronize with their menstrual cycle. Mm-hmm. Why is that happening? It's not because one woman is giving it to another. She's not saying, I have my period, now you're going to get it. That's not how it works. It's women, let's say you have 100 women in a room or in an office, 80 of them will probably synchronize and 20 of them will be outliers. So when you have 80 of them synchronizing, it's not one giving it to the other. It's because the women are synchronizing with the environment. Almost like a few decades ago, one man ran faster than was thought to be possible, breaking a mile under 5 minutes, I believe. After that, 20,000 people did it. Because one person did it, it made it possible for everybody else to do it. It wasn't because that man went and trained 20,000 people. It was because one man made something possible and embodied that energy. So it made it possible for everybody else to start embodying that energy as well. So right now, our collective resonance around the world, unfortunately, is more towards greed and corruption and war and things like that. That's not because of human nature. That's because we're synchronizing with an environment that we've decided to create. And if we decide internally, you don't have to make peace in the world around you. If you decide internally to make peace with the world within you, you will naturally inspire maybe somebody on the other side of the world without them even knowing that you exist. They will now start synchronizing with that. And then when you have two, you'll have a third that starts synchronizing with that. And suddenly you start shifting the scales, and the synchronization goes with something productive like peace or unity or compassion, as opposed to something counterproductive, which is war and greed and, crimes and all that. Wow. So the idea is, it's not about what human nature is. Human nature is infinite. It's about what free will of humanity chooses to do and how we decide to take our next action. Based on what you do internally, you'll make it possible for the other person to do the same, for the better or for the worse.
Now, 2024, adds up to the number 8. Number 8's like that symbol of unity, of balance. And there's a lot of people, channelers, psychics, the people who do the tarot, do the whatever on their YouTube channels, and even just people who are awake and tune in. They feel like they're waiting for something. They feel like 2024's got something in store for us. TLS talks about this PRS system. Are you aware of any, we better explain the PRS. What is it?
Problem, reaction, solution.
Reaction, solution. Is there any of those coming up for 2024 that you're aware of at the moment? Like, do you feel like there's shifts, there's things going on? Because there's bunkers getting built, there's, you know what I mean? There's like shifts and things in the news, coming up, and people were mentioning solar flares are through the roof, lots of things going on, Schumann resonance consistently sitting above 7.83. So can you explain? What do you think?
Before getting to that, let's talk about the numbers for a second. 2024 equaling 8, it's bullshit.
Really?
And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Because our calendar is not based on anything true.
Okay, good.
Our calendar is fake.
Let's do this. What
Our,
is it?
our calendar is not true.
Yeah.
Therefore, the number of our year is arbitrary.
Okay.
So we decided to break things up BC, before Christ, and after Christ. Somebody made that up. That wasn't based on astrology or astronomy. Somebody decided there's a new era. In 1700 something, the Pope deleted 11 days from the calendar. I don't know, but that's what they did because they couldn't make sense of the years because there's a lunar calendar and then there's the calendars that we use right now that's based on the sun. And I'm sorry, the Gregorian calendar is based on like arbitrary things. They're not based on things. We're missing 1 month too. There's supposed to be 13 months because the zodiac is based on 13 constellation. I think the 13th is called Ophiuchus or Ophiuchus or something like that. It starts with an O. Mm-hmm. And we're missing that. And by the way, if we had 13 months, then every single month would be 28 days and it would make sense. But we don't. Now we have leap years to make up for something, everything is wrong because it's not based on something true. So our year 2024 in the Gregorian calendar is named after somebody.
So we can delete that.
It's arbitrary.
Right.
So the only thing that makes 2024 equal 8, which is infinity, let's say, true, is our belief behind it.
Right.
Our belief is very important. Our intention is very important. That creates a lot of reality as we know it. But then there are fundamental objective truths beyond what you want to believe. And that's where mathematics comes in. Mathematics is not based on your belief. Mathematics is based on fundamental truths of creation. Whether you believe 1 + 1 is 2 or not, it's 2. There's nothing you can do about that. Mm-hmm. But if you believe in lack over abundance, you'll experience lack over abundance because that's how you create your reality. Your belief, your thought, and expression of that is your words, and then it turns into matter. So the real numbers that we're going to have to go by is numbers that are based on astrology, numbers that are based on lunar calendars. So now you go back to the Hebrew calendar. It's not a Jewish thing. I think the Muslims have the same thing. It's a lunar calendar. It's not based on whatever we decided.
It's good, right? What you said earlier, it's the numbers.
Yeah, it's all based on movement of actual cosmology and what's real, something that man didn't create. And when you base it off of that, the year that we're actually in right now is 5,783, not 2024. If you go according to that calendar, it's 5,783. So if you add that, what does that equal?
23, I think. Is that right? Yeah.
25, 7 is, what is that? 12, 8, 3, that's 23. Right. And then if you take 23, it'll equal 5. 5 could be the 5th letter. And I'm just making stuff up now to make connections. 5 could be the 5th letter of that alphabet, which is the letter He, which represents God. You can make up whatever you want over there, but if you're going to go if anybody's going to go according to Gematria, you have to base it off of something that's based on mathematics.
That's a beautiful, I love what you just said, because if it's God, and that's this year.
But then we can also say that every year holds something great. Yeah, because how can
Bashar talks about so many of these things people believe being simply a permission slip for people to access their own power that's already in there, and they're just giving themselves permission.
Absolutely. So that's where belief comes in, where it's very valid. But I see a lot of people taking Gematria and basing it off of English. You can't do that because English is based on a language that was created. It's arbitrary. So we would be mixing mathematics and then something that we created together. And again, it can help with your belief and tools that we use in belief, but it's not an objective fundamental truth. So 2024, from what I've learned in general, is there are different eras. Eras are not created by just numbers. They're based off of the energies of planets. So it's like the age of Aquarius. That's based on certain planets coming into different movements with other planets, which create different energies. And for people that look and say astrology can't be real, well, astronomy they only accept in science because it's based on something physical. And physicists like something physical. The second you come out of the physical world, they call it a pseudoscience. So astrology is talking about the non-physical characteristics of planets, the energy of planets and how those interact with you. They call it nonsense, but it's not, because it's planets or cosmology, like the moon, that causes high tide and low tide to happen on this planet, which means that there is an energy that impacts an energy physically somewhere else. Right. So astrology is not a pseudoscience. It's a very real science. It's just a science that's harder to formulate and calculate based on our current level of science. But when we see 2012, right? 2012, December 21st, 2012, the Mayan calendar ended. Why did it end? Because the Mayan calendar was based on the energies of planets, and they understood that it was a different, or an end, I should say, of a specific era and the beginning of a new era. So the physical people, right, the people that are only based on the physical world, they're like, oh my God, the calendar ended. It must be the end of the world. It wasn't. If you ask TLS, they'll call that the end of what they call the age of darkness and the beginning of what they call the age of light. A time where corruption is exposed, a time where agendas are exposed, a time where people see more truth coming to light. That's what we've been seeing since 2012. Right. And it's only escalating more and more and more and more. Everything in, I'm not going to say what the thing was because of where we're posting this, but on September 11th, 2001, there was an event that happened that day. Mm-hmm. And for years after, nobody really understood that there was a problem with that event. And we may not have been being told the truth. Today, most people understand that there was a problem because there's a different energy that we're surrounded by. And we're in a different era called the Age of Light that's dictated by that new energy of more truth coming to surface. The next era is called the Age of Love. So the Christians may call it the second coming of Jesus. It's supposed to represent something. It's not about a person. It's representing something. The Jews call it the days of the Messiah. The Buddhists call it the days of Nirvana. Everybody has a different word. It's a terminology crisis that we're fighting over. It's a different word explaining the same exact thing. This new era of consciousness that comes up. I don't know what they say in Christianity, but in Judaism they say that when the Messiah returns, the dead will rise, right? They'll rise from the dead. Well, we can interpret that in many different ways. Will they rise from the dead? Because that means there would be probably about 1 trillion people on this planet. Or could it mean that the veil of the illusion of death through this new consciousness and new awareness becomes thinner? And we understand that death never existed in the first place. And in that way, they rise from the dead because they're rising from the illusion that we understand is not actually true. That's what we're going through right now. In terms of Gregorian dates, 2025 and 2026, energetically speaking, astrologically speaking, hold a lot more positive sides. But to get to that positive side of the spectrum, you're going to need to experience the opposite. So 2024 is probably going to be a little more hectic, not in a scary way, in a very good way.
More light.
Yeah, it's the harder the situation, the more extreme a situation, the more you can actually pull from that situation. So it's like the greater the failure, the more you learn, right? The greater the sadness, there's a seed of joy in all sadness that you can learn from that. It all works in polarities. So I always say, I hope that things get as crazy as possible very, very fast.
Oh, we were talking about this.
We were talking about this, yeah, because the quicker it goes to the garbage, the quicker, unfortunately, people get hurt. It's that hurt that will cause people to have to be cornered into seeing something for what it actually is. Almost like we were saying earlier with the evil people in the world. It's the darkness and the experience of darkness that causes you to want to go closer to the light. It's the darkness and the evil cornering you into a room that's going to cause you to say, I need to do something about this. And it will give you more strength than you've ever had before. And that's how the darkness is actually the light in disguise. It's like God or this divine source doing its thing to wake itself up. And the deeper we are asleep, think about it like this. If I was asleep and you had to wake me up because there was something important, you're first going to start by speaking maybe and saying, Jason, wake up. I wouldn't wake up. You're going to get louder. I wouldn't wake up. You're going to start moving me. I wouldn't wake up. And naturally, you're going to get louder and louder and louder and louder because you need to wake me up. And that's how it works on an individual level and on a collective level. For me, I dislocated this shoulder a bunch of times. I almost died from a staph infection. It was that divine will, that God, that source, that divine, whatever you want to call it, that intelligent design of everything, that was leading me to a place of saying, wake up. And if you don't, the messages are going to get stronger until, if you don't listen, you might die. But dying is not the end. It's a lesson. You go, you come back, and you start all over again. And then you're going to have the same messages come through your life until you decide to learn the lesson. And usually people make the biggest change in their lives when they hit rock bottom. On an individual level, it's when they hit rock bottom that they turn around. That's what happened for me. That's what probably happened for most people in the world. You always have to hit rock bottom first, your own version of rock bottom, in order to even have a reason to want to go higher and start doing something else. And that way, rock bottom is a blessing. Now we're just experiencing that on the collective level. So I think 2024 will be our version of rock bottom. And I know that may sound scary to some people, but that's a very good thing. It's a good thing because it will give us the strength to keep moving forward.
And when you say that, some people would get triggered. They would say, like I've seen before, comments on your posts and whatever, I've had them directed at Roxy and myself. Oh, you shouldn't be talking about anything to do with fear. Oh, you're triggering fear. And people get worked up by that. Mm-hmm. But it can be a positive thing to be realistic.
Well, you mentioned problem, reaction, solution.
Yes.
So let's explain something, because the people that say that, again, not to bash anybody, but it's a super linear way of thinking that they're thinking. And I'll explain why. Problem, reaction, solution has 3 different dimensions to it. How does it work? So I'll try to keep this friendly in the way that I'll explain it, like friendly for most platforms. Let's say that they want everybody to receive some sort of intervention with their body. Okay?
Understood.
That's the solution. That's the solution that they want to get you to. Now, remember we spoke about inversion. Everything works in inversion. So you have to work backwards. Reverse engineer that for a second. To get to that solution, how do you get an entire world to do something that they would never do otherwise? Well, if you tell them to do it, they won't do it. You need them to want to do it. How do you get them to want to do it? You have to create a problem in order to induce a reaction, so their reaction will cause for them to ask for the solution that you wanted to bring all along. So there's an interesting part in that equation. It's not just about the evil people. We, the people, hold a very important part of that equation. And it's in the reaction part that we have the power. So evil creates a problem, man-made, manipulated, in order to create a solution. So create a problem. Everybody's, getting ill, whatever it is. Reaction, oh my God, everybody's dying. We need to find a way to overcome this. Solution, there's this magical thing that's going to come and save you, and everybody's going to line up to get it. Now, when I speak about certain things, there are some people that say, Jason, you're spreading fear. And I look at them and I say, you're not thinking the right way, because this is what I'm actually doing. I'm speaking about the problem, not to manifest the problem, but to change the reaction. Because if you can change the reaction, they can't implement the solution.
Right.
But because the spiritual community, not everybody, but they think in terms of the most basic way of manifestation, what you focus on, you manifest. That's not just how it works. There's nuances to that whole thing. What I'm focusing on when I speak about the problem is I'm trying to show you why that problem is fake. And if you understand why that problem is fake, you're not going to react in the way that they would have wanted you to react. Because you have to believe that problem is real for them to induce a reaction to bring their proposed solution. So when I speak about certain things that sound like it's fearful, it's not. It's supposed to bring that up, to bring up the problem, to make people aware of why it's fake and manipulated, then to create a reaction that would be different from what they wanted you to experience. Because now if you know the problem is fake, you're not going to run around with like a chicken without a head and be like, oh my God, everybody's dying. Right. You're going to be like, oh wait, it's not what they're telling me. There's something else going on here. And I know how to overcome it because I know what the problem is. And if you can do that, and you have an entire collective following a new way of reacting as opposed to their proposed way or intended way of reaction, the solution will never come to being. And in that way, the laws of manifestation do hold, because we're focusing on what we want to manifest. What I want to manifest is for that solution not to come forth. So focusing on that solution would be the problem, because it's their solution that's not actually a good solution. Focusing on the problem will make people think that you're focusing on the solution, but you're not. It's because people don't understand the 3-step process. There's multiple dimensions here. So again, in short, to summarize, you focus on the problem, not to create a problem, but to change the reaction. You change the reaction, the solution can never come to being, and therefore you foil an entire plan to take over the world. And that's how you do it. But because people can't understand that, they just stop on level one. You're like, he's focusing on the problem that's going to happen.
Yes.
It's not how it works.
Yeah.
Operation Bluebeam is a perfect example. When I speak about that, this proposed alien invasion, why do you speak about it? Why do I speak about it? I speak about it because that's the problem. This is a perfect example now to beyond philosophy application.
Yeah.
So they create a problem, alien invasion. It's not real. It's going to be using holographic technology and things like that. But if we believe it's real, then we'll be like, oh my God, our reaction will be what? If you think that that's real, they're coming to kill us. There's life outside this planet that's coming to kill us. This is horrible. Solution, why would they want to do that? Number one, stay away from the very beings that have technology that would destroy the powers that be on this planet and give us freedom. Number two, bring the world together and create a one world order, a new world order. Because if we have a collective foreign threat, the world will come together and create a one world government. And like Ray says, everybody will be on their knees and accept it because we have a common threat or a common proposed threat. When I speak about Operation Bluebeam, again, problem, reaction, solution their way would be create alien invasion, get people to believe it and be afraid of that and say we need to do something about it. And then government steps in with the solution, which always takes away your freedoms and liberties, and say, stay away, they're bad, they're part of the devil, they're demons, whatever it is, and we're now going to operate as a one world government because we have a collective threat. And boom, they got exactly what they wanted. But if we speak about the problem and speak about Operation Bluebeam, explaining that it's not what they're saying that it is, and that there's actually something bigger going on here, and that it's a manipulated, man-made version of what they're trying to get you to believe, then the reaction will not be, oh my God, they're foreign beings that are coming to kill us. The reaction will be, that's not real. We know what's going on here, and there's a government that's trying to take over. And if we can stay focused on that and not be diverted away from their solution of what they want to bring, they will never be able to bring in that one world government, new world order, and divert our attention away from free energy technology. So in that way, people on a linear level will say, he's focusing on Operation Bluebeam, he's manifesting it. No, I'm not. Because whether I like it or not, that could happen. And if that happens, we need people to be aware of what's actually going on. Change the reaction, solution can't come in. That's your obvious inverted example of how that whole thing works.
Love it. That's a beautiful explanation. That answers that. So it's going to be a great year then. There could be all sorts of things going on. I know actually for you personally, massive year, first event coming up. Perhaps we could finish by sharing a little about this amazing event for everyone who's, out there, who's heard about it, perhaps not heard about it. I love the name, Transformation.
Yep.
Expand a little.
So you and Roxy are going to be there. It's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to be the guy hyping everybody up, which I'm super excited for. Basically, I've always wanted to do this. I've always felt a calling to just do something on a mass scale simultaneously with a lot of people that can inspire them in a way to transform their lives. And then through what we were explaining earlier, creating a new environment to synchronize with. As those people transform their lives, we're transforming many other people's lives as well. And that's a really, really important part of it. That's why I focus on larger numbers and larger volumes, because the more of us who can do it, the better chances we have. But the purpose of the event itself is, in short, to teach you how to think instead of to tell you what to think. To give you the power to discern and understand the fundamental rules and the fundamental laws, because there are laws of how this world works, and there are very few laws to how this world works. So there are some people that look at me and they're like, Jason, how do you know so much? I don't. I know very little. But the little that I know, because there are those laws that everybody could know, and it's very easy to learn, when you learn them well enough and they become second nature, everything starts making sense. So if you focus on the physical world, you'll always be focused on the nuances and the details and all that. But there's a world that dictates the laws and the rules in the physical world. And that world is called the spirit world, or the energetic world, or the non-physical world, whatever you want to call it. So the purpose of this event is to focus on the fundamentals of that world, so you can then build everything on top of that foundation. So it's not just focused on how to live a better life for yourself. It's not just focused on how to have more conscious relationships. It's not just focused on how to have a better business and be more abundant when it comes to money, health, whatever it may be. All of those things are the same thing expressed differently. It has the same base laws. So the way that I'm breaking it up is I'm teaching the philosophy of certain things and then the application of what that actually means. And it's going to be a 3-day event, 2 days specifically, with the first day being focused on connection, bringing people together. And I think it's going to be great. And I'm really looking forward to like creating that container of energy so people can, number one, meet everybody and create those lifelong relationships, which I'm sure a lot of those will come out of, and just continue doing this. So although this is the first one, I do plan on continue doing that. And a lot of people requested for live stream access because not everybody can come in person because we have a capacity. So we're doing in-person in Orlando, Florida. We have live stream option available as well for anybody who wants to do it from the comfort of their own home. It's going to be a great time. So I'm looking forward to it. You guys are going to be there. Damian Wynn is going to be there. He's going to be guiding meditations throughout. And it's just going to be magical. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of things that come out of it that we don't know until we get there. So I look forward to it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be super exciting. We're really excited to be going and to be supporting you.
Thank you.
And I wanted to thank you for today as well for just letting it go in all directions. I had 3 pages of questions. I think I only asked 2, and I said I would just sort of be spontaneous and go off in different directions. And I love that. And I think that, you know, we can really go to some places which, you know, help it to be so real and answer a lot of questions for people watching this because of that spontaneity where we just kind of flow with it. So yeah, thank you.
That's why I didn't want to see the questions, because I'm like, let's just, you know this, you know, it's like when you try to script something, it becomes so structured and like weird.
Yeah.
And it's just not how we are.
Loved it. That was beautiful. Enjoyed the chat. So thanks very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.